Hi everybody, we're still on the PiterPy conference. It's the second day, and here's the Cris Ewing. Chris, please introduce yourself. Tell something about from where you are and what you're working on.
Great. My name is Chris. I come from the United States, from the city of Seattle in the state of Washington. We're in the upper left-hand corner. I'm an independent developer. I have my own business in Seattle where I do consulting on web programming. And I also do a lot of training. I work both for the university there and also for a small company called Code Fellows that does training for Python web programming and teaches people who are switching careers how to enter the world of web programming using Python.
Okay, thank you. And what was your theme about?
So I talked today about my favorite open source software project. It's the Plone Content Management System. It's really the gateway that I used to enter the world of Python programming. And my talk was about the development of this piece of software. It's actually almost 15 years old now, the library, and it's in this long and storied career gone through a number of changes. And I talked a little bit about the history of those changes and about some of the new technologies that make up the recent version that we released in October of this year.
I read that Plone was one of the things that was the reason why enterprise companies was focused on the Python like the technology, because they saw, oh, it's the enterprise ready solution that we can use in our companies for replacing some Java stuff or something like that. And after that, it was the real push for Python like language to have additional investments from the big companies like the enterprise solution and the possible technologies. Is that right?
It is. Plone actually has a long history of supporting the enterprise and of being available for large companies to use. It's a very secure product. And because of the security aspect of it and its power in terms of workflow, it has been used by companies that have a real investment in trying to maintain their content in a rules-bound fashion. Plone is used by enterprise companies, by governments. The government of Brazil, all of their websites run on Plone. The website that's powering the Olympics this summer is a Plone website. The FBI and the CIA in the United States run their public-facing websites on Plone. NASA used to use it. I think there may still be a few scientific mission websites powered by NASA that are Plone websites. It's used by educational institutions, by non-profit organizations, and because of the power of the software and because of the strength of the community in Python, Plone developers have actually become quite a commodity. There was a point a while back at which both Google and Mozilla were rating the Plone community for their top developers. So a number of us have gone on to work in the enterprise in various companies around the United States and the world.
Thanks. And you mentioned the Plone community. In fact, community is one of the main topics of our interviews on the PiterPy. So I want to ask you about the community, not for Plone, of course, for the full Python community in your location. We're trying to understand the situation with the local communities. Because of course there is a lot of big PyCons all over the world, but we are talking now on the small local communities when the Python Foundation is not coming and making the big event. So is there any local community in your location? How big?
So Seattle is blessed. There's an organizer in Seattle whose name is Don Shu, and he came to town. Before he came to town, the Python community was an organization that was called CPIG, for the Python Interest Group, right? And CPIG had been around for quite a while. It was sort of a sleepy community, maybe 15 to 20 people who met once a month, got together, but it was always the same people. It was a beloved community, a very comfortable community, but not a rich and growing community. Don came in and really breathed some life into the community and brought in a lot of interaction with some of the larger companies in Seattle. He's a very forward-looking guy. And so now the Python meetup that he runs, which is called the Puget Sound Python Programmers, or Programming in Python, so it's PuPPy is the name of it. So the PuPPy organization now has over 1,500 members. Our monthly meetups tend to run between 100 and 200 people who show up at a time. We move around between different companies in Seattle, so we'll have meetings at Zillow or Rover or a number of other companies in the Puget Sound area that actually use Python in their own development stack. So the community is vibrant, it's strong. They have not only their monthly meetups, but there's also weekly programming meetups. So they get together both on the east side of the lake and on the west side of the lake, and there'll be 20 to 30 people every week who get together and work on their open source projects together. And this is a great opportunity for young coders, right? People who are just getting started. They can come in and contribute to a project and sit right next to people who are experienced developers. And that kind of interaction of experienced programmers with newcomers is the best way to grow a community and to build it over time. And so I think this has been a tremendous boon to us. They're now trying to branch out into hardware nights. So there's a couple of people who are organizing a monthly meetup where we get together and do programming with Raspberry Pi or Arduino or various sort of hardware kits. Nice. And so there's a lot of special interest work that's being done as well. But it's a good community and a very vibrant community.
Okay, and are you only attending on this community or maybe some other communities, or also try to organize something by yourself or be a part of the organization of something?
I've tended to try and just belong. Between all of the education work that I do and running my own consultancy, I tend to be a fairly busy guy, but I really like community a lot. I owe a great deal of my own career and my own development to community organizations that have really helped me out. I've given back over the years by being a member of Plone's foundation. Plone is actually run by a 501c3 nonprofit organization that owns the copyright to the software. And so I served on the board of that organization. I've also participated in trying to organize our own local Plone meetup. But the Plone community in Seattle is not as strong as once it was. We used to have maybe 20 or 30 people. We're now down to maybe a half a dozen or so who show up regularly. And because we all end up working with each other, we don't have meetings as often as we should. I would like to be more active, but there's only so many hours in the day.
Yeah, and what do you think about the future of the local communities? Because currently it's a lot of tools to communicate between the different parts of the world, of course.
Yeah.
And it becomes more and more big conferences.
Yes.
And not only focused on Python, but a lot of just common IT conferences that have the Python sections and so on. So, in fact, I don't know how exactly in the USA, in Russia, every month at least one big conference where there is the Python represented in some way.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the future of the small communities in such?
I think that without small communities, it's going to be hard to continue to grow Python. I think Python owes a lot of its existence to small local communities and the kind of community support that allows somebody who's new to the world of coding to come on board, to learn their craft in a sort of a comfortable and low-key fashion. And so I'd like to think that local communities will continue to thrive. I think the problem, of course, with local communities is it takes a tremendous amount of energy to organize them and a tremendous amount of time and effort to keep them up. Like I was saying, the Python community in Seattle owes most of its existence to Don and the people who work with him to make the puppy meetups happen. Without really strong support from local organizers, I think local communities are hard to sustain. But I think that they're really vital to the continued development of Python as a software tool. Right? Python is the community as much as it is the software. I think it's as much about the people, about these kind of interactions, as it is about sitting down and writing at a keyboard somewhere. And so I think without this, it doesn't feel to me like it's going to continue to grow the way that I'd like to see it grow. And
what about channels that are using the Seattle communities instead of offline meetings. Of course, it's the main communication thing, but currently there is a lot of different messengers, services, social networks. What are used in Seattle or not used?
I think probably the current king of the hill is Slack. There's a lot of Slack channels that have sprung into existence. I'm a little old school. I'm still an IRC fan.
I'm also using the IRC still. But in fact, for me, Slack is just new reincarnation of the IRC because it's quite the same. In IRC we have IRC server with the different channels. In the Slack we have different teams with the different channels.
Exactly.
So it's quite the same thing, but it's a little bit just with the tools for code code sharing and additional tools.
I would say there's no doubt that it's an easier interface to work with, and I think, you know, IRC has for a long time been kind of the marker of a serious programmer, right? Along with a beard and a serious look, you have to be on IRC, right? And you have to be accustomed to looking at white text on a black background. Slack really changes that, and I think it opens the community to people who otherwise might be sort of intimidated or turned away by it. It's attractive, it's easy to work with, it's available on your phone, so you don't have to be sitting at your computer to use it. There's a lot of advantages to having a tool like Slack around. And I think as we go forward, those things will be vital, right? I mean, community. The interesting thing about community as a software, I was sitting in a bar once with some Plone developers at a conference, and we were looking around us and realizing that the other people in the bar who were there were members of a fraternity, which is a college organization where, you know, people who all live in the same house, they get together and they go out and drink together, they live in the same place. Their community is very physical, right? Everybody lives in close proximity to each other. In the digital world, we have the same idea of community, and we have a lot of friends and people that we interact with, but we interact with them across this sort of cyberspace, right? Across the network. And I don't think that makes it less of a community. It just makes it a different kind of community. Tools like Slack that enable those communities to thrive across distance and outside of time, right? Because I can write a message in Slack and know that even if my friend is asleep because he lives in Russia, you know, that when he wakes up, the message will be sitting there and he can read it and reply to me, right? This sort of asynchronous communication really helps to make communities strong. I think they're going to be good for us in the long run. I just have to get used to living in a different world than the one I grew up in.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Very interesting.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really enjoying it.